Good morning. I'm Hugh Burrows. I want to thank our hosts Elizabeth Eckdale and Ron Swisher for letting me sit in and moderate this most special mosaic. This Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion. You have to let those words sink in just a little bit. The Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion. We are pleased to have two distinguished and young professors to help us with this. They're co-directors, Mark Csikszentmihalyi and Jonathan Sheehan. Mark, Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you very
Jonathan,
much. It's great to be here.
Tell us about your center.
Well, the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion, it's at on the Berkeley campus, and we started the center, well, just to give you the quick general background, it's a center that gathers together different faculty from across the campus in all sorts of different departments who work on religion and collects their energies in one place and produces a set of programs that are public that people can come to on all sorts of different topics and different religions, spanning from the very beginning of kind of recorded history up until the present. Berkeley's a place that's always had a tremendous range of different kinds of scholars, and has never had a collection point for bringing their energies together. And the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion is that. We started it in 2012, and so we're in our fourth year now, I think, or fifth year of real programming, and it's been going strong ever since. It's the first time that there's been a real dedicated project on religion, an institute for the study of religion on the Cal campus. So we're really proud of the kinds of things that we're putting together there.
Well, that's what's exciting here. And you're a professor of history.
That's correct.
And particularly you focus on the Protestant Reformation and so on. Had an op-ed piece in the New York Times on John Calvin, for which, as Presbyterian, I'm grateful for. Mark, you are a professor of, I'm looking for the Eliezer Chair of International Studies.
Right, and I'm a professor in the Department of East Asian Languages and Cultures at Berkeley.
And you are working on matters Confucian writ large, is that correct?
Right, I'm interested in kind of Chinese religions, and that's usually defined as Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And I'm in kind of an area studies department, so we don't actually have a department of religion. And so one of the things about our center is that we're made up of people in different departments, but we don't have anyone who's specifically in religious studies per se. So although I was in a religion department before coming to Berkeley, my area is kind of East Asian languages and cultures. Yeah.
And on a personal note, I understand you were at Davidson and got to watch a local basketball star playing.
Right, yes, and actually my son went to Steph Curry's mom's Montessori school in Cornelius, North Carolina, so I also have that connection.
Well, those are the real bona fides here.
Right. That's right. That's why you've got us on the show.
And so on this program, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and you're going to talk about, again, this center, what it does, and then we'll move on to your interests and how we got here. So a very special mosaic. I hope that you'll stay with us. The Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion. Berkeley professors Csikszentmihalyi and Sheehan here are the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion, the surprise Berkeley Study of Religion. What more do you want to tell us about this?
Well, why don't we the surprise. So you're surprised at the, and I don't, probably our viewers might also be have some surprise at the idea of studying religion at Cal, and it's not the surprise is not unwarranted. It's been a long time since Berkeley's had an interest in and institutions for studying religion, and that's a story that's of some interest. I think it might be of general interest to people in your audience, thinking about how public universities like Cal think about religion. I mean, the university is, on the one hand, one of the great oldest institutions in the world. It's been around for 800 years. Has thought about religion for many of those centuries. In the last 100 years, religion has played a more complicated role in public universities. And at Cal, there was at some point a decision not to have religion included as a major topic of study. There's a major theological Center for Theological Study just up the hill. And the sense was, I think, for many major research universities, that religion was a topic that was best left to others. I think in the past, and Mark, you should jump in whenever, but I think in the past 20 years or so, as religion has become a really important public subject for conversation, both in political terms and social and cultural terms, it's become increasingly clear that as a public university, this is something that we would be doing a disservice to our students and to the public at large if we didn't dedicate some significant resources to its study. And so we're delighted to be able to start this now. It feels a little late in the game, but there's some advantages, I think, to starting this project now at a moment when religion is so forward in our everyday public life, in our everyday politics. I think it gives a certain kind of power to the study that 50 years ago might well have felt like studying something which is just about to go away, and now we know it's not.
Well, Presbyterianism maybe, but for that, Mark, why are you involved in this?
Well, I mean, I was in a religion department at Davidson, so I'm deeply interested in kind of what the source of people's values and ethical decisions are, whether they come from a religious or a non-religious kind of background. But I think what Jonathan is talking about with the proper role, or trying to imagine what the role of the study of religion is at a public university, is a really important question. At Davidson, which was a private Presbyterian-affiliated college, originally their religion department was a Bible department. And even into the 60s and 70s, if you were in that department, you had to be a confessing Christian. And so religious studies, as it's done in much of the United States, comes out of a particular background that's very doctrinally focused, and generally was traditionally very confessional in the way it approaches religion. And so, the questions are, you have someone who teaches Old Testament, someone who teaches New Testament in a Christian college, and then there would be maybe added in the 60s someone who teaches world religions. What we have here at Berkeley is a chance to kind of reimagine. And so we have this real chance to say, okay, let's imagine how we might study religion in this kind of cross-disciplinary way that doesn't grow out of the study of scriptural traditions. And so I think that's one of the ways in which what we're doing has the potential to do something slightly differently.
Well, you pose the question, and so how do you go about it that's new and different?
Right. Well, I think what you do is if you think about religion as a complicated, whether or not you're a believer, religion has provided a kind of archive of the imagination, a set of practices, of social organizations, of political life that have been around for thousands of years. To think about it, to understand what it is as a phenomenon, even so, either it's 1,000 years ago or today. We think that you need to approach it with all of the different resources that you might have. So you might think about the scriptures of different religions and think about them in the ways that people use them, the ways that people inhabit them, the kinds of doctrines that they produce. But you might also think about the kinds of bodily practices that liturgies, let's say, or the fact that some people have religions that are socially attuned in certain kinds of ways. So you need to have a sort of social interest in the religion. And then religions have different kinds of politics that associated with them. Even within, say, Christianity, which is the subject I know most about, there are certain religions that have been very anti-political. Certain Christian confessions that have been very anti-political, had no interest in being part of the state, some of which have been well integrated into the state. So we need to think about the phenomenon in political terms as well. So, we bring to the table specialists in the humanities who know how to read these religious texts, special sociologists who think about how religious communities constitute themselves and imagine their borders and interact with one another, people who work on religious politics and the histories of religious politics to think about how religion over time has interacted with different sorts of political formations. And all of that, I think, is important now for us in this age that we live in, an age which is both in the United States highly plural and also contentious.
Okay, how do you do this? You guys are sitting there, you have this idea, you have this university, and people can't talk about religion. How do you, what do? You call them up and say, let's get in a room and let's start talking, and where did you start?
Well, we started by getting Dean's support for this. So, you know, Dean Tony Cascardi and Carla Hess were early supporters of the center, and we got a kind of institutional kind of umbrella that we could work with. And then we've been working very hard to get faculty buy-in, so that we have a kind of diverse group of expertises and interests.
Give me an example. How do you, when you bring people together, you get them around a table and you give them a cup of tea, and then you say what?
Well, I think Jonathan should talk about the Loose initiative, which is...
Well, yes. For example, we recently wrote for and got a $1 million grant for the study of what we call public theology. And so that includes faculty from the German, English, in East Asian Languages Department in the Humanities, and then from the sociology, history, anthropology departments in the social sciences, and we got them together and we said, let's imagine that we want to put together a big, robust set of programs, public programs, that will support research for graduate students, for faculty, support a series of lectures and conferences and workshops that the public might be invited to attend. And we designed this together. We wrote the grant together. We built the different parts so that it would support people's different interests and different kinds of constituencies.
Okay, so somebody comes to speak. And you had a speaker series this year, which I missed, unfortunately. What do they talk about?
Well, I mean, we have a couple of different ones. We have an endowed lecture on religious tolerance, which has been really interesting. I think we've had 4 of them now. And five. Okay, well, we just had the 5th. And so that's specifically on the topic of tolerance. We have a set that are religion and the arts, which have covered a number. We've had people from, you know, practicing artists, people from the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, people who do history of art or architecture, and we've had collaborations then with other institutions on campus. And we have the public theology lecture series.
So these would include things like we had lectures this year on trying to understand how people visualize Mecca. So an art historian who thinks about how people have painted and thought about Mecca as an art historical subject. We had a big conference on theology in China and Europe that Mark has not talked about, but that he organized, to thinking about how different ways in which missionaries moved between China and Europe and brought and argued about Chinese religions and Christianity and the kind of interface of those. We've had talks from Jewish studies faculty who come and talk about why we should study Christian theology. We've had people who are writing new books on the study of the Bible, so say New Testament scholars come and talk about what it means to think about the New Testament, both as a historical document and one that one might believe in. This is a scholar who plays both of those roles in his life. So, you know, it's quite a diverse group of talks that address a bunch of different interests, and that's part of the advantage of the center. I mean, that's what our goal is, just to produce this conversation that cuts across traditions and has a deeply historical, but also speaks to the present, our own present religious political moment.
We're talking about the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion, the University of California, Berkeley. More when we come back. Stay with us. We're talking with Mark Jensen-Mia and with Jonathan Sheehan. They are professors at the University of California, and they are studying, lo and behold, both areas in religion in the public university. And so that's news. Again, Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion, and you can Google that. Their programs are over for this academic year, but they're coming back next year, and they will offer things that we can go to in various ways. Gentlemen, now we know a little bit about your academic background, yours in particularly Calvinist studies, and you're in Confucian Taoist studies. Where did you grow up? Mark, let's start with you.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, And my father was a professor at the University of Chicago who taught psychology and sociology. So I started learning about religion through kind of Marxist sociological approaches to religion and kind of critiques of religion, so history of religion and things like that. But what was interesting about that was that my father, despite the fact he had this kind of Marxist orientation, was not really an anti-religious person. I mean, he grew up in Rome. He was educated in kind of classical, a classical gymnasium where they read Latin and Greek. And so I was brought up with this idea that religion is neither inherently good nor inherently bad, that it was vital to understanding kind of how societies work. And so when I became interested in East Asia, and China in particular, I started looking for, what were the sources of their values, and why is it that they believe this and this and this about the spirit world, which is different from what people believed in Greece and Rome. And so I got just very interested in kind of what we call religion as kind of this bedrock fundamental kind of set of beliefs about the cosmos and about where values come from. And so I found when I was writing my dissertation in graduate school that I kept going more and more towards what was kind of called religion in East Asia. And when I interviewed for jobs, I interviewed for jobs in history and jobs in East Asian studies, but it was a religion department at Davidson that was most interested in what I did. And so I find myself doing religion in part out of this kind of orientation from my father that's not a religious perspective, but from a perspective that if you really want to understand culture and society, you have to understand what kind of these fundamental bedrock questions are. And so that's where my interest comes from.
We live here on the edge of the Pacific Rim, and so the intersection of the West and the East, it's a good place to live. And you live in San Francisco?
Right.
Family?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, we're bringing up kids in this interesting multicultural, and I have a kind of multi-ethnic family too, and so it's a fascinating place. My daughter goes to Catholic. She goes to Sacred Heart, and then my younger daughter is going to go to a Chinese dance-centered school and learn Mandarin. And so in a way, for a household where you're bringing up kids to be curious and interested in all the religions of the world, this is the perfect place to live, I think.
Well, see, there's a good plug for our San Francisco Bay Area. Jonathan, a bit about you.
Well, so speaking of fathers, my father was... So I come from a family of Catholics, three different kinds of Catholics, the three different kinds of Catholics in my view: the melancholy Irish Catholics, and the jollier Puerto Rican Catholics, and the more intellectual European Catholics, and none of which was part of my growing up, because my father, who went to Catholic school all the way through college, then left the church with we closed the door with a bang behind him, and so it's it's been an interesting, in a way, backing into the interest in religion in my own life. But beginning of my life, I was going to be a scientist. In fact, I wouldn't describe what I do really as work on Calvinism so much as work on the ways that theology and the ways of imagining the world in theological terms relates to ways of imagining the world in secular terms, in scientific terms, or in anthropological terms. And so I started off in the sciences in college, and then slowly grew, I don't know whether it's growing or not, but moved from the sciences into an entirely different imaginative sphere, really, the sphere of the religious imagination. And and along the way, there's been kind of an accompanying sense of kind of personal discoveries, of moments where you you look at your own family history. So I had an uncle who was a missionary actually in China, a Catholic missionary in China, but who went there really to China in 1949 to study Chinese dialects. But the way that you could do that, and then he got kicked out, and then he went to Japan after that. The way that you could do that in 1947-49 was to go and be a priest. So he was somebody who was sort of, on the one hand, both religious and secular at the same time. He would go on to Japanese game shows and do Stump the Chumps with, because his knowledge of Japanese dialects was so extraordinary that he could do a kind of Stump the Chumps game shows with native Japanese speakers. And so, that, I think, so there's a way in which the family story creeps into the intellectual life all the time, but often in unexpected ways. There's I guess it's interesting in some sense that, that I don't study Catholics, actually, that my main interest really has always been in the Protestants. So I don't know if that's because I'm nervous about studying the Catholics or if it's because I think the Protestants are so unusual that I really need to understand them.
Two questions. How did you get from Brown University to Cal?
Well, I came and did my PhD out here at Cal, and then because I had this unusual background.
And your PhD topic is?
My PhD topic was on translations of the Bible during the Enlightenment in the 18th century.
Okay, and you live in El Cerrito?
I live in El Cerrito. I live in the heartbeat of the East Bay, the heart of the East Bay, pulsing heart of the East Bay, and El Cerrito is actually an interesting community for a lot of the same reasons that San Francisco is an interesting community. It's it's a position between sort of richer Berkeley and poorer Richmond that captures a whole variety of different, I think, diverse.
Particularly with a large Japanese population,
That's right.
along with Anglos, into what was a working class white, and a lot of African Americans during the Second World War came work in the shipyards and so on. So both then you're enjoying that, and what do you do for recreation and fun?
I'm a beekeeper. And a golfer. So I'd say those are my two recreation and fun things.
Mark, when you're not going, when you're not with your family or are with your family, and you have a little time, what do you like to do?
Well, we have 5 kids, most of whom all of whom are living at home now. So I think I remember having free time about 6 years ago, and we did some hiking.
We'll have a little more time when we come back. Thanks for staying with us. Mark Csikszentmihalyi, Jonathan Sheehan of the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you very much. Website is what?
At bcsr.berkeley.edu.
bcsr.berkeley.edu. Professors, thank you. It's been a joy to have you on Mosaic.
It's been an enormous pleasure.
Hope you come back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching.